Good day, everybody. How's it going? My name is Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Sports Medicine with the Robs. Today, we are talking about deconditioning and what to kind of expect once we go back to sport with athletes, especially looking at the pro level athletes that are really getting a 2-week warm up period to get back into game shape when they've been quarantined for freaking ever, right? Like, you assume these multimillionaires have home gyms and are keeping in shape, stuff like that. But like working out in the gym versus actually playing competitive NBA or competitive NHL is completely night and day different. Like you see the difference in preseason of football, right? Preseason of football is probably the worst football you ever see, and that's why they have the 4-week warm up period to kind of get back into game shape, get the starters back into full thuds, full hitting, stuff like that. Rob, what do you think about the 2-week warm-up period? Do you think that's going to be enough for everybody?
I think as far as basketball goes, we're not going to see as big of a drop off from that because it's a physical sport, but I don't think it's as physical as, hockey. So I think when we see the NHL comes back, if we see the NHL come back to finish off their season, because they had like a 22 team playoff format thing that they threw out there. I think if we see like a 2-week roll in with hockey and a 2-week roll in with the NBA, I think we're going to see two different products kind of come out, because just from the physical or the physicality aspect of it.
Basketball is still pretty physical, especially because there's a difference between 5v5 NBA speed game versus like a 3v3 pickup game, right? Like there's more space on the court, especially when you're at home working on 1v1 drills and stuff like that. You're going to have more room on the court to work with. You're not going to be up against the person, right? 5v5 NBA court, they're going to be pressing up against each other. And I know the rules kind of now play towards you giving a little more space or a little less defense so you have higher scoring. But it's still physicality that players are going to have to get back into, no?
Well, yeah, there's definitely going to be the physicality of it. But I think when you compare the two sports like those that have had pretty much gone through an entire season, more or less, or at least 75% of a season, and then you get this however many month layoff they've had now, two and a half roughly. So probably closer to 3 now, actually.
Because it was like what, March to April, April to May, May to June, so 3, almost pushing 4 now.
Yeah, so you go from full swing. It was probably good for some guys to get that rest in there, but now you have, like I said, with the 2 weeks coming in, basketball between the NBA and the NHL obviously not being the more physical between the two. There's definitely going to be a physicality in basketball, but then when you compare it to the NHL, these guys are on what, 1/4-inch sharpened blades going 30 miles an hour and screaming into a couple of boards.
I love watching hockey. I hate covering hockey, but just because whoever decided that let's put knives on our feet, shoot a vulcanized rubber puck at 100 miles an hour with a wooden stick. Like that sounds like a great time. Like, it's awesome to watch. And I get it. The players are tough as nails, but it's still terrifying as an athletic trainer, just kind of like sitting there at the game and being like, that puck just went right for their neck. Okay, they're back up, but like that would have literally killed anybody else but a hockey player, right? Like the two craziest sports you could ever work with as an athletic trainer, honestly, rugby players and hockey players. They're all tough as nails.
Well, yeah, because both of them are just crazy in the head.
Right.
First of all, who came up with the idea? Let's play football but with no equipment.
Well, also besides that, it's like, okay, so the main way to get the ball in rugby is once the ball carry goes down, we're just going to line up and have a ruck and just push each other back and forth full speed, right? Like
you're essentially watching sport version mosh pit. Okay?
I tell everybody in hockey, or not hockey, everybody in rugby is a goalie, right? Like you got to have a certain mentality to be a goalie. in the first place. Doesn't matter what the sport is, soccer, field hockey, like you got to have a certain mentality to be a goalie. That's not normal, right? Number one, everybody in rugby is a goalie. period.
Yeah, I can't argue with that one. Yeah. I think the only difference is instead of like a puck or a ball being the projectile towards you, it's literally another human being.
Right.
It's
But
like, yeah, this is really
so
this is sane.
Back when I used to actually play rugby, my mom made me do a lot of research beforehand before I signed up for rugby. Yeah, fun fact. Which is funny because I was in a really non-scoring position. I was the highest scorer for my team. So like, humble brag there, but whatever. It also played to how bad our team actually was, but that's the whole besides the point. So fun fact about rugby versus football. Rugby hits, football players hit 15 times harder. Rugby players get hit 15 times as much. And the difference between like football and rugby is football, you have the pads to kind of disperse all that force that's being put on you. Rugby, wherever you hit, you're getting hit, right? So it's not as heavy hits, but you're getting hit. If you get hit in the sternum, you're hitting the sternum, right? Like you're getting hit in the sternum. But football, because they have the padding on, gives them basically a mental armor as well. So they're like, all right, let's just go and just projectile full flying down the field. I almost cussed there, and that was not a good sign. But flying down the field, you know what? I got this armor on, so I can just throw caution to the wind and go from here. But I mean, injury rates for both sports are actually quite similar. They're just because I know, especially in younger rugby schools and stuff like that, they train proper form tackling. And it's against the rules to kind of shoulder tackle like you see in football all the time. So they have to wrap up and pull down, which is shown to be statistically safer than just full blown. Let me just shove my shoulder into the other guy and call it a day. Try to drop him. I'm getting off topic though. That's me on my soapbox about rugby versus football. I like both sports. Don't get me wrong. But
preview for another episode,
right? But like also look, going back to like hockey and basketball, right? You see a couple players who they're like, okay, the season's over. I'm gonna go get surgery, right? You're gonna see they're not playing the rest of the season. But then you see players like Kevin Durant, who might. I don't think he is, but he has the possibility of making a comeback right now, like because it's been over a year since his injury at this point. Well,
I think we're right around that area where that time period where he went out.
Right.
I think it was beginning of June last year, wasn't it? Or it was like right at the beginning of the finals.
That team is not really doing anything, Brooklyn, but as of this moment. But if they were in the mix of things, right, getting a Kevin Durant back healthy, like is astronomically great. And quite frankly, he'd have that same warm up period as everybody else. Now, granted, he'd have a little bit more deconditioning because he's been down for a year, but you got to assume he's been drilling and stuff like that, like crazy more than everybody else, just because he's been through rehab and stuff like that, working on a lot of that stuff, working with the athletic trainers and whatnot. So, I mean, there's probably some disadvantages to some teams, but also some advantages to other teams. Quite frankly, I don't know if they actually should keep carrying on the sport. I think they should just called it not had a champion this year, just because of the risk involved. That's my personal opinion on that one. You know, these businesses, they have their own agendas, so I can't speak for them. But I think the games we're going to see coming back, especially the first couple weeks of like full games, it's going to be rough. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say if they come back, and from what I understand is both leagues, the NBA and the NHL, from what their plan was to come back and just kind of play out playoffs. So kind of along the same thing as what you were saying is I think if they come back, quite frankly, I think that first round of however many teams they have, that first round of their playoffs is really going to be rough because it's really going to be players coming back into form. Kind of like your point earlier. You can have pickup games, and even pickup games with other, NBA, NHL players, like other professional athletes. You can still have pickup games, but it's a completely different mindset from, hey, it's a pickup game in a
It's like
home gym or out at the park,
it's
and
like the Pro
now
Bowl,
this matters.
right? Like the Pro Bowl versus a regular season game. You know what I'm saying? Like the linemen stand up in the Pro Bowl, right? Like it's an exhibition game. They're not there to get hurt.
Yeah.
They're not there to, if they win, they win. If they lose, no harm, no foul, right? Like that's the point of an exhibition. So there's going to be a big speed change. I also, I'm wondering about like player chemistry too, right? Because like you develop throughout the season, certain habits with your teammates, stuff like that. I'm wondering, especially for like the rookies, are they going to be as valuable, right? Like somebody like Zion Williamson is going to be good no matter what. But
yes,
but the Pelicans in general, he doesn't know any of those. He's never played with any of those players before. So how is he going to catch back up faster? There's going to be a huge learning curve getting back to your teammate speed as well. And that comes back to the psychosocial aspect of this whole return to play thing too, because it's not just a physical aspect that I think a lot of people worry about. There's also a huge mental aspect of, especially with all this stuff going on, is what if I catch this virus during this time? What if I, don't show up during this random playoffs that's happening during the summer, and whatnot? Like it's I don't think the quality of games we're going to see during the summer is going to be the same as what we would see if it was a normal playoff. Quite frankly, I don't think people care because they're just happy we're getting sports back. But I think injury risk especially is going to be a lot higher because the deconditioning process, right? The players are not going to be used to it, and you're going back to playoffs, right? You're going 0 to 100. There's no regular season to get back into in-season form. It's you go from basically out of season shape to end season shape, and you got to do it like that.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the biggest factor is to see which teams, which players can all kind of get that switch flipped. And one of the things that I learned, this was last week, and then we decided we were going to talk about this week. But Henry Cejudo, I think had, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best games plans to try to mitigate the difference between training level and like actual in competition level. For some of the listeners that don't know, Henry Cejudo is former 2008 Olympic gold medalist for the United States, and recently retired. He was the UFC flyweight, which is 125 pound, and UFC bantamweight, which is 135 pound champion. Recently retired from the sport. But what he would do in training is they would almost simulate the fight down to everybody except really his opponent. So like he would set up the gym and he would find a room. They would warm up there. His sparring partners would have a room and warm up there. They would do walkouts. They would do, they had judges. They had a referee, but they would essentially simulate how, everything that was going to happen on fight night. They would try to simulate that. But even with that, there's going to be a jump between training level and actual competition level.
And we can go back and forth on the solo sport versus the team sport aspect of that all day, right? Like, because quite frankly, a lot of those UFC fighters, their game is every 6 months, right? They train for that opponent for however long they're in camp for, however long they know their opponent varies month to month. But I mean, their game time is when they're fighting every however many weeks, however many months, right? Team athletes, even like tennis athletes, where they're going back and forth, right? You don't have to. I think tennis is a bad example just because you can kind of go full force in tennis and not fully worry about big injuries like you worry about with basketball, with hockey, stuff like that, right? But the team sports where you kind of have the season to kind of get in shape for playoffs, get ready for playoffs, and kind of let everything work through. There probably needs to be some exhibition games, like basically, I guess like a pseudo summer league, or preseason. I think would probably be the best bet, just to kind of get everybody back into game shape, and go from there. But also, if you look at it, like if they're missing a key player because of the player went through surgery and they're out for the rest of the season, or they're getting a player back, right? The new people they bring up are at higher risk for injury because they're definitely not up to speed, because they probably weren't playing before the season ended, right? So like they're in practice speed, but they never played it. But that being said, they wouldn't have been into super playing speed in the regular season if they weren't getting time in the first place. So I guess that kind of counterbalances itself anyway and becomes a moot point. But do you think there's a big difference? Do you think there's a big difference between the solo sport aspect of MMA versus like the team aspect of like NBA and MLB and NHL, stuff like that coming back?
I think the biggest aspect that we're going to see that's going to be different is team chemistry. Obviously, because of the solo sport type of thing, and then the fighters obviously don't need that. But then basketball, NHL, all these team sports that are going to be coming back, those guys still have to work within a core group to accomplish a goal. Now, that's not to say that the MMA guys don't have that per se, because while they compete, it's a solo sport, but in training, it's very much a team sport. It's whose team can out train who,
right?
Essentially, and the only thing the fight does is show whose team could outwork who. Now there are the anomalies where guys are not the greatest in the gym, but lights go on and they can show up because it's showtime. Yeah, well. He's got.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole.
Me and Rob have had this discussion multiple times.
That we both, that's for another podcast. We both
are we both are on certain aspects of this on certain sides, and it is.
Rob and I could have a whole another podcast on just non-sports medicine stuff, right? Like we're trying to keep this relatively sports medicine focused, and eventually we might have like a side project that's just basically us yelling at each other for 20 minutes, which is basically a conversation between Rob and I.
I was gonna say that's a norm, like that's
right, like yeah. So
that's far-fetched.
I called him yesterday to let him know my computer was out of commission yesterday, because we normally record on Fridays. We're recording this on a Saturday today. And I called him yesterday saying my computer was out of commission. So we're going to do this today. Somehow we got into a 20-minute argument on John Jones and Dana White. But like I said, that's for another podcast. I was calling him about my computer. We got into MMA somehow. He finds the way to loop around. The one thing you need to know about Rob is when he tells a story, it's think of Ant-Man's friend from the Ant-Man movies, right? Like you kind of just have to let him go, right? He'll get to the point eventually, but he's gonna take you the whole way around, and there's gonna be little side stories that kind of go on, stuff like that. And it's
look here. I tell 20 stories in one story. Right. Okay, it's an amazing feat.
Okay. None of them have anything to do with what is actually happening. Basically, take my little rugby rant that happened, but like add 6 more stories, and that's basically Rob trying to tell one specific point. We went into a 20-minute debate on whether he liked cheese or not. Like it
depends on what kind of cheese.
Right. So we're not getting into that. Right. Like we're not starting that here. But I've coming from personal experience with just general off-season training and stuff like that. I think trying to recreate their preseason stuff, I guess, in a shorter amount of time, right? And you kind of have to hope that your professional athletes at this point stayed in shape, right? Like they kept up with their home workouts and stuff like that. I'm personally, for the high school level, for the middle school level, I'm not worried about it because my players come in shape every season, so it's not really going to make a difference. Like I asked my track runners, when's the last time they ran a mile? It's by this point it's March, April, right? And they're like, June.
Every time.
Okay, yeah, all right. We no wonder you have a headache and are feeling lightheaded and giving me concussion symptoms. Drink some water, and then go run. Like it's you didn't hit your head, right? You're fine. Drink some water, and go run. That your problem is you're out of shape. So like that's not going to affect high school level at all. It's going to be par for the course with pretty much everybody. College you might see, depending, but I still think, especially with like the colleges going to online, the athletes are having to do all this online stuff from home. They're not having their off-season lifts like they normally do, and they're not having their off-season sports stuff like that they're used to. Like especially the freshmen, the sophomores and juniors that are normally accustomed to it. Seniors are graduating, so it's really not going to make a difference unless they come back. But that's a whole other point. Plus, these athletes are not getting paid, right? They may have partial scholarships and stuff like that, but they're not being paid. They don't have all the access the pros have to kind of do all this. They have to rely on, their willpower. Which, I mean, if you're a college athlete, your willpower is usually pretty good, or your talent's that good. But it's a lot harder when the resources aren't as great. So I think you're going to see a pretty good drop off on college football and stuff like that, especially with schools where you're seeing like a resurgence. Was it Clemson just had 11 cases or something like that? A couple 10, 15 cases pop up, right? They're going to have to go through a 2-week quarantine where they're not going to work out. They're going to come back to summer workouts, maybe. That's a whole nother podcast. That go ahead.
I mean, as far as the high school scene goes, I'm interested to see. I'm going to try to follow this a little more closely. Pennsylvania is actually allowing high school sports back at, I believe, at least that seems to be some of the vibes that I'm getting from some of our colleagues that I'll follow on their multiple social media platforms there. Seems to be that some of the PA schools are going to be coming back, I guess, to just do like a modified playoff type thing.
Do they have enough of a season to do? Well, I guess basketball, right? Like most basketball seasons didn't end, but I know in Delaware we just didn't have the championship game, right?
Right. Yeah, it ended. It ended before the semifinals.
It was supposed to be Dover High and Dover High. Was it Caravel?
I was just looking at the I want to say Caravel. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think I'm wrong on that one. I know it was definitely. Yeah.
I was just looking at the brackets before this. I know the other game was going to be Apo and Sanford, though.
Yeah.
Which would have been a rematch from the quarterfinals from last year. So that was shaping. I mean, it was shaping up to be a good Final Four.
Because baseball didn't have any games before we got closed. We were still.
No, I don't.
I'm speaking from the middle school perspective. We were still in spring. We were still in training, right? We had our.
I'm pretty sure the high schools worked.
We had our first scrimmage like set up a month later, the week we shut down. Basically, was when we were going to start grinding things. And the middle school stuff is usually a couple weeks behind the high school stuff, just because trying to organize a middle school team is Yeah.
I know Maryland, or at least at the school that I'm at, we had, I want to say maybe 2-3 at the most preseason or scrimmages all around. I'm pretty sure if it was 2 or 3, it would have been baseball or softball. Boys and girls lacrosse, I think, only had 1. And at that, I only think it was girls lacrosse that had 1. I'm not sure that boys had a scrimmage yet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was it'd be, and I don't know how Pennsylvania has their thing set up. Like I said, and I'm not even saying that this is right. I'm just saying that's
Right.
the kind
This
of
is what's
that's the
happening.
vibes that I was getting
Right. This is
from the people that I know that work in that setting.
and I will always tell you, like, if that kind of decision stuff happens above my head, right? Like it's I'm not the expert on infectious diseases and stuff like that, so I'm not gonna play like I know. I'm gonna listen to the experts, what they say, and kind of just go off of that. I think what I'm really gonna be curious about is those star athletes that are multi-sport athletes, right? Their talent's still gonna be there, right? Like you can't talent doesn't detrain. But if you're used to playing, if you have your star running back who's also a track star, also maybe wrestles or plays basketball, right? Granted, they got the basketball season in, so that's the whole nother point. But maybe they're a track star, maybe they play lacrosse, maybe they do a spring sport that cross trains them really well, and they didn't get the opportunity. Are they going to be? They'll still be good. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But are you going to see a drop off on those players coming back in the fall because they didn't get their cross training in with their other sport, their spring sport that they're used to playing, that they're used to doing, right?
Right. I think especially too when you look at like the crossover of like running backs or wide receivers that then go and in the spring will do, 100-meter dash for track.
Right.
Like is that
Our best track athletes
initial
have been the speed positions in football, right? Like
yeah.
usually consistently.
Like, are we going to see that speed drop off now because of that? I mean, probably not greatly.
Right.
Because like you said, the talent
in high
there,
school is always going to shine through, right? Like talent from high school down is always going to shine through, right? You're going to have your work ethic athletes, right? That are up there in the top, and they will be good no matter what because their work ethic's still going to be there, right? The talent's still going to shine through. So I don't think there's going to be a big drastic drop off on the top schools, barring they graduate seniors and stuff like that. I don't think there's going to be a big drop off on the good players at the schools, but I'm wondering if it's lowering the ceiling, right? When you talk of like skill ceiling versus skill floor, the higher the ceiling, the higher potential you have, the higher the floor, the harder it is to get in, but like the better you are when you get in, kind of thing. High school sports, the floor is pretty low because basically, barring you're at like a 900 person school, if you try out for the team, you're probably going to make one of the three teams that have varsity, JV, or freshman, right? Like you're going to have an opportunity to play. So the floor is pretty low in high school, middle school sports. The ceiling is pretty high though, right? Like the skill ceiling up there. I'm wondering if this like detraining is going to lower the ceiling just because your best players that are usually used to cross training are not going to have that cross training application to them. I don't think you're going to see any big records broken this year. Like I'm call me crazy. I don't think you're going to see any big records in high school sports this year, barring again a godlike athlete. You know what I'm saying? Like you have like a LeBron James coming out of middle school playing in the high school league, stuff like that. Something like a generational talent coming out, right? Like it's
right. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I definitely don't think that there's going to be any big records that are broken. I definitely think we're going to see a lot of athletes that had the potential to break maybe state or school records, maybe come like just on the cusp of it, but not get that and not to any fault of their own or that they're not
working hard enough,
committed or anything like that. But just the hand that they've been dealt and everybody's been dealt this year, it's gonna limit them, and we're just they might get right there, but like you said, I don't see a lot of records being broken this year. Definitely not shattered for sure.
Correct, right. And injury wise, like again, high school level, I don't think we're going to see a lot more injuries than we already do. I don't think the detraining for especially a lot of our athletes is going to be as big, just because, especially the one sport athletes, that pretty much all the activity they do all year is either football or if they only wrestle, right? Like, and if they only wrestle, they're still probably going to wrestling camps like in the fall and the spring, stuff like that. So they're still doing their individual stuff, and I don't think that's going to change too much. I'm curious to see how, you have that stud quarterback come in who was, he was freshman, sophomore, going to be a junior this year, going to lead the team this year to state championship, stuff like that. How big of a drop off do you see on him? Right.
Right.
So I think it's going to be an interesting thing to look out for. And quite frankly, this is really something I don't have the answers for. I think training wise, I think we just kind of have to allow appropriate time to recondition, right? Like it's the same as anything. That's why you have the 2 weeks, 2 weeks in August for your preseason for football, right? You're going before school starts for 2 weeks, getting things back in order. Your first game may not be for a month, but your football players start mid-August going in. Soccer players mid-August. Basketball players are starting their preseason stuff, November-ish, give or take.
Yeah, roughly between the first and second week of November.
I feel like as long for the high school, middle school level, I feel like as long as they're allowing appropriate warm up times like they have been. I think the stuff our preseason stuff is adequate, right? Do I think there's probably room for improvement? I think there's room for improvement on everything, and I think that's why we always constantly research. Like research always needs to be constantly done on acclimatization. Even stuff we think we know doesn't mean can be improved, right? And maybe this kind of leads the way into, hey, what's some research we can do to get people back into game form as fast as possible, right? And fast and safely as possible. I need to always emphasize the safety because, quite frankly, that's the most important part. That was a big strike of lightning outside my house. Cool. Well, that's all I got for today. You got anything else? Any words of wisdom? Any golden nuggets, Rob?
Oh, I just had one too. No, I mean, just nothing else on this topic. Just, everybody stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys back in here next week.
Yes, we appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast / YouTube thing. If you really liked it, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button down below. You know how this whole thing works. It's YouTube. Like, if you don't know YouTube by this point, like, how'd you find us? Stay safe, have a good time, and stay healthy.